Good morning, RPMs. For today's video, we are discussing the whorl patterns of fingerprint. In whorl patterns, there are 4 types of specific patterns. We have the plain whorl, central pocket loop whorl, double loop whorl, and accidental whorl. But now, we will determine what is whorl patterns. Whorl pattern is a pattern which concern pattern which have a 2 deltas and at least a ridge that makes a complete circuit. This circuit might be spiral, oval, or any variant of a circle that can be found within the pattern area. If that may suffice, that will be considered as a plain whorl. Moreover, a recurving ridge, however, which has an appendage with it, in the line of law, cannot be constructed as a circuit. In plain whorl, this is another qualification for a certain whorl pattern to be qualified as a whorl pattern, specifically a plain whorl, if an imaginary line drawn between the 2 deltas must touch or cross at least one of the circuiting ridges within the pattern area. So, in short, pag sinasabi nating whorl pattern, a whorl pattern is having a circuiting ridge or a complete circuit that can be found inside the pattern area. Can be spiral, oval, or any variant of a circle. Moreover, another qualification, when a imaginary line drawn between 2 deltas, that imaginary line must touch at least one circuiting ridge or circuiting ridges. Whorl patterns is having a at least 2 deltas. Okay. Tingnan natin yung illustration. Okay. Look at the illustration. So, ito po yung whorl patterns. Ito. This one, and this one. So, what's the qualification? It must have a circuiting ridge inside the pattern area. Any variance of a circle, at least it is a circuiting ridge or ridges. Another qualification is if imaginary line drawn between 2 deltas, at least a circuiting ridge or one circuiting ridge must touch the imaginary line. In this illustration, we are drawing an imaginary line from the left delta to the right delta. Ito. This is LD, means left delta. And this one is the RD, meaning right delta. Okay? So, when drawing an imaginary line, it must emanate from the left delta to the right delta. Ito po yung imaginary line from left delta to the right delta. So, in that imaginary line, mayroon bang nagtatouch or touches na mga ridge or ridges in the imaginary line that is being drawn from left delta to right delta? Yes. Ito. Ito sila. Ito po yung mga circuiting ridge. Yan. Yan. Very clear. Mayroong mga circle. That means It is a plane whorl since when an imaginary line drawn between two deltas from left to right delta, mayroong mga nagtatouch na ridges sa imaginary line. Another set of example, this one, ito. RD, meaning right delta. And we have this, yan, ito, left delta po ito, brother. LD. And this one is RD, meaning right delta. Okay? So, when an imaginary line drawn between two deltas from left to right, it is very evident that there are circuiting ridges that touches the imaginary line. That is why it qualifies as a whorl pattern, particularly plane whorl. Moreover, another example, ito, the same, na left delta, ito, and we have this one is the RD. Okay, this is the right delta. Okay. When an imaginary line drawn between two deltas, again, there are ridges that touches the imaginary line. Anong klaseng ridges? Circuiting ridges. That is yung tinatawag natin na plane whorl. Plane whorl in classification of fingerprint pattern, in identifying the fingerprint pattern, mayroon po yung sign na double U. This one. And that's the sign of a plane whorl. Okay? Nagkaintindihan na ba tayo? Okay, let's proceed to another pattern. Okay? So, another one is the, yan. Okay, let's continue muna. Okay. Again, as I said, the minimum requirements is having a 2 delta. And then, it might be spiral, oval, circular, or any variant. Yan. If imaginary line drawn between 2 deltas, at least one ridge. Yan. In the inner pattern, must touch the imaginary line. Ito. This one. So, from left delta to right delta, mayroon po tayong na-touch na imaginary line. L, D. This one is R, D. Okay? And another one, ito, and ito. When an imaginary line drawn between two deltas, this is circuiting ridge. And another example, this one, that is LD. Ano nga yung LD? That is left delta. And another one is the right delta. The outer terminus po. When imaginary line drawn between two deltas, it must touch at least a circuiting ridge. And this one, ito. Tara? Okay. Let's proceed. Okay. Another set of example. Now, another type of whorl pattern rather, is a central pocket loop. Anong apelyido? Central pocket loop whorl. Na kung saan, yung kanyang sign is ito po. Sign as C. Kanina, si plane whorl, W yon. Ito, central pocket loop whorl is, that is C. Ano ito? What is central pocket loop? A central pocket loop whorl is a pattern which most part daw. Ang most part is para daw siyang look like a loop. Kung titingnan mo, in general perspective, it is a loop. But which has a small whorl inside the looping ridges. Kaya nga, nagiging central pocket loop yan. FBI defines a central pocket loop as a pattern which consists one or more recurving ridge. Of course, mayroon talaga yung recurving ridge kasi generally, the general perspective of this pattern looks like a loop or an obstruction at a right angle in the inner line. Kaya lang mayroong obstruction, either right angle on the inner line of the pattern area. And then, having two deltas. But however, when an imaginary line drawn between two deltas, it must not touch any recurving ridge within the pattern area. Though mayroon siyang mga recurving ridge, however, pag nag-draw daw tayo ng imaginary line between two deltas from left to right delta, hindi niya matatouch itong recurving ridge na nasa loob ng pattern area. Okay? Let's proceed to the illustration. So, ito po yung mga whorl patterns under central pocket loop whorl. It is very clear. Kung titingnan natin, generally, it looks like a loop. Diba? Para siyang loop kung titingnan mo. This one, number 1, ito. This is number 2. Kung titingnan natin ang number 3 example, it looks like really a loop. But when we look at in detail or details, we are, ito po, makikita natin na mayroon siyang mga circuiting ridge inside. Ito. Ito po yung mga circuiting ridge inside. Kaya nga, it qualifies into a loop pattern. Another qualification na it qualifies into central loop whorl patterns rather. Another qualification, aside sa circuiting ridge inside the pattern area, when drawn an imaginary line, this is the left delta. Yan. And this is the right delta. Yung tinatawag natin na RD. Yan. Pag nagdo-draw tayo ng imaginary line between two deltas from left to right, it touches no recurving ridge. Meaning, wala siyang natatouch na recurving ridge within the pattern area. Mayroon bang natouch na recurving ridge within the pattern area? No. Another example. Okay? Location of delta. Muna. Ito. Yan. This is left delta. And this is right delta. Kasi, kung titingnan natin, itong pattern area, ito, dito, mayroon talagang circuiting ridge. Pero when you look at it, it generally looks like a loop. Because there is a circuiting ridge inside, kaya nga nagiging central pocket loop whorl yan. Okay. When an imaginary line drawn between deltas, it touches no recurving ridge within the pattern area of a fingerprint. That is central pocket loop pattern. Moreover, on example number 3, ito. This is the, yan, LD, and this is the RD. Ito. Diba? the left delta, and then the right delta. Yan. So, drawn an imaginary line between two deltas. It does not touch any circuiting ridge or an obstruction at the right angle inside the pattern area of a fingerprint that is most likely look like a loop, but there is a circuiting ridge or an obstruction at the right angle inside the pattern area. Walang natatouch na recurving ridge. That is why it is a central pocket loop. Again, it is represented with a letter C as their sign. Claro? Okay, let's proceed to the next slide. Okay? Yan. This one. Kung titingnan natin, ito, it looks like a, and most probably, it looks like a loop. Pero, there is a circuiting ridge inside. Kaya nga, location of delta, ito, when we look at the LD, yan, left delta, and a right delta, yan. And then, drawing an imaginary line between two deltas, touches no recurving ridge that qualifies into loop. Mayroon bang circuiting ridge? Of course. This is the pattern area. Ito po yung pattern area. Mayroon ba siyang natatouch na loop within the pattern area? No. Wala siyang natatouch na pattern. Na looping ridges within the pattern area. Clear? Okay. Let's proceed. So, yan. So, this is a circuiting ridge. Automatically. Ito po yung delta. And this is the left delta. Ito. LD. And this is the RD. Okay? So, when drawn between two deltas, it touches no recurving ridge. And this one also, ito, the LD, yan, ito, and RD. Imaginary line drawn touches no recurving ridge. The same here, ito, wala pong recurving ridge that touches the imaginary line. These are the variants of central pocket loop. This is the delta, imaginary line, it touches no recurving ridge, and this is the delta, and this is the delta, the LD, ito po, and this is the RD, ito po. When touches, when drawn between two deltas, it touches no or cut or touch any recurving ridge in front of the inner delta or within the pattern area. Kaya nga, nagiging central pocket loop po yan. Okay? Let's proceed. Another variants of loop, another examples of central pocket loop patterns. There is a circuiting inside. Kung makikita natin, delta, delta, there is forming circle. This is a circuiting. Ito. And we have this delta, delta. And there is an obstruction, an angle inside the pattern area. Ito. And then delta, another circuiting ridge. These are the variants of loop, central pocket loop, whorl pattern. Pero, okay. Let's proceed to the next slide. O. Yan. Another variant of whorl patterns is double loop whorl, which is represented by the sign of D. Kanina si plain whorl, W, and itong si central pocket loop, letter C, and double loop whorl is letter D. Okay? Yes, there is a loop, but having a two separate or distinct loop formation. One of the loop either surrounds or overlaps the other. Besides the two loop formation, a double loop must have two sets of shoulder. One for each loop. Two distinct loop yan. So each of that distinct loop, separate loop, mayroon din silang independent shoulders. Right? And then the left shoulders. Pero? Okay. Let's proceed. Ayan. This is the variants. Ito po yung mga double loop whorl. Kung titingnan natin, this illustration representing a two distinct loop na mayroon silang mga separate na shoulder. The same goes here. Ito. Kaya nga, double loop whorl. Yan. Of course, a loop patterns must have a two or more deltas. Basically, two deltas yan. So this is the delta and another delta. Another example, this is 1, 2, and 3. Kung titingnan natin, ito, this is a loop pattern and loop pattern. So, dalawa sila, double loop. They are separate loops. Yan po. Kaya nga, two distinct and separate loops within the pattern area. Kung titingnan natin, ito po yung pattern area. Of course, i-determine natin yung delta. I-determine natin yung ito po yung delta. On example number 3, the same. Kung titingnan natin, separate loop ito at saka ito, separate loop pattern. Two distinct loop. Mayroon silang kanya-kanyang shoulder. And this is the delta. And another delta. We have this LD and RD. Okay. So, anong requirements ni double loop whorl? It must have a two distinct or separate loop patterns inside the pattern area. Each of the loop patterns must have their own shoulders. With that, it will now qualify as a double loop. Ayan. Separate and distinct shoulders and having two deltas. Mayroon bang mga delta ito? Left delta and right delta? Mayroon ba siyang two separate distinct loop? Mayroon. Mayroon ba siyang mga shoulders? Separate? Mayroon. That is why it qualifies into a double loop whorl pattern. Clear? Okay. Let's proceed. Okay, ito. Kung titingnan natin, yan. This is a two separate loop. Kita? Kung makikita natin, this is a loop pattern and another loop pattern. Mayroon ba silang shoulder? Yes. Shoulder 1, shoulder 2, and we have this shoulder, and we have this shoulder. Are they inside the pattern area? Nasa loob ba sila ng pattern area? Yes. They are inside the pattern area. We have the delta and another delta. Klaro? So, nandito si LD, left delta, and dito si RD, right delta. Clear? Okay. Let's proceed to the next slide of this topic. Okay? Ito. Yan. Two separate loop or distinct loop formation. Ito po. Another one. And this is a loop pattern. And this is a loop pattern. Mayroon ba silang shoulders? Yes. This is the delta. This is the delta. Mayroon ba silang two deltas? Mayroon. Mayroon ba silang two separate loop? Mayroon. Mayroon ba silang shoulders with each of the loop pattern? Mayroon. Kaya nga, it is considered as double loop whorl. Another example, this one, still, ito, yan, two separate loop, delta, dalawang delta, nasa inside the pattern area sila. Ito, inside the pattern area po. Kaya nga, double loop. The same goes here. Two separate loop, two separate loop. Ito, dalawa ito. Mayroon bang mga shoulder? Yes. Mayroon bang dalawang delta? Yes. So, anong loop pattern yan? Double loop whorl pattern. And another example, separate loop, separate loop. Ayan. And this is the right delta. Ito. This is the RD. And then the LD. Ayan. LD. Qualify ba siya sa loop? Double loop whorl pattern? Yes, because it has two separate or distinct loop and distinct set of shoulders. That is double loop whorl pattern. Okay, next. Accidental whorl, which represented the sign of X. And ito. X, accidental whorl. What's the qualification of a accidental whorl? Accidental whorl is a pattern that is a combination of two or more different patterns. Meaning, it is a combination of two patterns. Except if there is a combination of a plain whorl, a plain arch rather, it will not be considered as a accidental whorl. Any of the pattern that may combine is considered as accidental whorl. Another distinct or unique characteristics of accidental whorl, it might have a more than two deltas. So si accidental whorl ngayon, pwede siya magkaroon ng 2, even 3 or 4 deltas. Aside as having two combination of more than 2 or 2 patterns, pwede siyang magkaroon ng 2, 3 or more deltas. That is accidental whorl, which is represented by X. Okay? May clear on that? Let's proceed. Ito po. Yung combination of patterns. 2 or more patterns. Okay? Kung titingnan natin, yan. This is a loop. This is a loop. Yan. And another one. So a combination of two or more pattern. This is a loop and this is a, ano ito? Tinted arch. Hindi siya plain arch. Two patterns. Sabi kanina, two or more. Pwede. This is a double loop and this is a loop. Kanina ito, double loop pa rin and mayroon ding loop pattern. So a combination of two patterns or two or more. Hindi sinasabi na two pattern. Pwedeng two or more pattern. Of course, in loop patterns, qualification must have a two deltas. Mayroon bang two deltas ito? Yes, mayroon. Ito. And we have this center delta. Kaya nga, tinatawag natin yan na CD. And this is LD. And this is RD. Okay? Klaro ko diha. Another thing, yan, mayroon ba itong delta? Yes, this is a left delta. And this is the, ayan. Another set of delta. Same goes here, delta. And we have this, another center delta. Ito, CD ito. And this one is the right delta. So, mayroon siyang 3 deltas po. Combination ba ito ng dalawang pattern? Double loop and a loop? Yes. Separate patterns yan. A tinted arch and then a loop? Yes. A double loop and a loop? Yes. A combination of two patterns. Pwede ring more than two patterns. Accidental whorl po yan, represented by sign of X. Okay? Let's proceed. Yan. Yan. Okay? This is a loop pattern. Kung titingnan natin, this is a combination of a two patterns. Loop pattern and the central pocket loop. Mayroon bang delta? Yes. Left delta and right delta. Kaya nga, that is a, yung tinatawag natin na accidental whorl. And we have here the left delta, the right delta, and this is tinted arch, and this is a loop pattern. Whorl pattern pa rin ito. Circuiting ridge. Circle. Yan. Ito, circuiting ridge. Hindi yan double loop. Kasi hindi yan two separate distinct loop. But a circle. That is accidental whorl. Having two deltas and a combination of two or more patterns except, remember, except plain arch. Kasi later on, magdi-discuss na naman tayo ng plain arch or arches pattern. That's the next topic that we will be having. Okay? This one, a combination of two or more patterns. Yan. This is a, ano po ito? Titingnan natin, this is a combination of, yan, a combination of, yan, ito, and this one, and this one. This is a loop pattern. And this one is a loop pattern. And this one, mayroon siyang, kung titingnan mo, mayroon siyang delta. Mayroon din siyang, mayroon bang delta dito? We have here, the delta here can be found here. And it can be found here, the center delta. This is a central pocket loop whorl. And this is a loop, and this is a loop. Pero, this is the center delta po. The central pocket loop, the loop, and the loop. Combination of two or more delta. This one is the, ito, LD. the right delta, left delta, and this is the right, ito po, RD. Okay? Let's proceed to the next slide. Okay? Yan. Accidental whorl. A combination of two loop patterns. This is a, titingnan natin, ito, delta, delta, and delta. This is a loop pattern, and this one is a loop pattern. 3 patterns. This is delta, center delta, and then the right delta. Yan. This is loop, and this is, yan, central pocket loop whorl. Another thing, this is a loop, and this is a central pocket loop whorl. 3 deltas, the left delta, the center delta, and then the right delta. Same goes here. This is again the central pocket loop po ito. Ito. Yan. And this is the delta. This is another set of patterns. Kaya nga, accidental whorl po ang tawag natin yan. Because it is a combination of 2 or more pattern except plain arch po. Okay? Our next topic will be the ridge tracing. But for now, let's end our topic for today with the whorl patterns. Thank you for watching. Once again, good day.